The Emerging Issues Task Force, or EITF, met in September 2014 to discuss several open issues, including Issue 13G, which deals with determining the nature of the host contract in a hybrid financial instrument issued in the form of a share. A final ASU on this topic was issued in November 2014. I'm Dan Amat, a senior manager in KPMG's Department of Professional Practice, and I'm happy to be joined by Billy Williams, also a senior manager in our Department of Professional Practice, who's part of the team actively following EITF issues. Over the next few minutes, we'll provide you with a high-level summary of the background and the final consensus reached for this ASU. So with that, Billy, why don't you share a little background on this issue?
Sure. A hybrid financial instrument is a contract that contains both the embedded derivative and the host contract. And under derivative guidance, you're required to bifurcate the embedded derivative from the host contract and account for it separately if certain criteria are met. One of those criteria is if the embedded derivative is not clearly and closely related to the host contract. So in order to make this determination regarding whether you bifurcate or not, the entity first needs to determine the nature of the host contract. So when a hybrid financial instrument is issued in the form of a share, the entity needs to determine whether the host contract is more akin to debt or to equity. So if the host contract is considered to be more akin to debt, then the redemption feature in the contract will be clearly and closely related and would not be bifurcated. On the other hand, if you have a host contract that is more akin to equity, then a conversion feature, which usually is an equity-like feature, will be clearly and closely related and you would not be required to bifurcate. Now, I just do want to point out that the scope of this ASU is really limited to just hybrid financial instruments that are issued in the form of a share. So there's currently diversity in practice on a couple of things regarding how you would actually evaluate the nature of the host contract.
Okay, thanks, Billy. So let's assume as an example that you have a convertible preferred stock, stated value $100, no stated maturity rate. And let's also assume that the instrument contains a conversion option, dividend rights, voting rights, and a redemption option. Is the host instrument in this case more akin to debt or equity based on these assumptions?
So that's where the problem lies here. So we could look at this contract and we could come up with different answers. And there's a couple of reasons why. The first problem is related to what method you use to evaluate this embedded derivative. And then the second is, if you're using a particular type of method or one of the particular methods, you may come up with different answers. So originally there's three methods that had been discussed in practice. That was the whole instrument approach, the chameleon approach, and the pure host approach. And under the whole instrument approach, entity would look at all of the terms and features within the contract to determine whether the instrument is more akin to debt or to equity. Under the chameleon approach, you would exclude certain embedded derivative features that's being evaluated for bifurcation when you're evaluating the host. And then under the pure host approach, you would exclude all of the embedded derivative features when evaluating the nature of the host. The final consensus for the ASU is that the whole instrument approach will be used. So entity would consider all of the instrument's terms and embedded derivative features when evaluating the nature of the host contract. So that's one part of it, is that we will now consistently all be evaluating the nature of the host contract using one consistent approach, which is the whole instrument approach. But under the whole instrument approach, you could still weight things differently and also cause an issue or diversity in practice. So let's just say if you're looking at the whole instrument approach, and in your example here, you said that there was a redemption feature. So one would place or could place heavy weight on the redemption feature. You would say that the instrument is more akin to debt because the redemption feature may have significant weight. Now, on the other hand, you could look at that same instrument and you said, well, you have a conversion feature, and a conversion feature is more similar to an equity-like feature. And then let's say, well, the conversion feature and the redemption feature, they may offset, but then you're still left with other equity-like features such as voting rights and dividend rights. So in this same scenario and the same fact pattern, if you're looking at the CFO and the controller and they're trying to make a decision, although the CFO may win just because he's a CFO, there could still two intelligent people can look at this instrument and make a different answer or come up with a different answer based on the facts and how they would weight things within the contract.
Okay, so what did the EITF suggest to address this dilemma?
Okay, so in order to assist the entity with applying the whole instrument approach, the board has developed this 3-step process that would assist the thought process that an entity may go through. So the first step is pretty intuitive. So an entity would identify all of the terms and features that are stated or implied within the hybrid financial instrument. In our example, you would be identifying, okay, we have conversion rights, redemption rights, and voting rights. And that's part one of your assessment. Now, step 2 is to assess the substance and the relevant terms and features. So in this step, an entity would assess the strengths and the relevant terms and features. So this assessment would include consideration of the characteristics and the terms and features. So let's say if the instrument included a contingent feature or a non-contingent feature, or is there an in the money or out of money feature, things of that nature. You would also consider the circumstances in which the hybrid financial instrument was issued. So for instance, if the instrument was really a residual interest in the issuer because the entity was thinly capitalized, or is the entity profitable and well capitalized? Now, within step 2, you would also consider what is the expected outcome of the instrument and the likelihood of that expected outcome. So how is the instrument expected to settle? Are we expecting to settle this in shares, transferring assets, or will the instrument really remain in legal form equity? And then step 3 here would be to weigh each term and feature and conclude on whether the instrument is more akin to debt or to equity based on all the relevant terms and features. Now, during deliberations and during discussion, the FASB realized that this analysis will still require a significant amount of judgments. However, the implementation guidance should help narrow the scope of the gray area in trying to make this determination. So the standard here will be applied on a modified retrospective basis to existing hybrid financial instruments that are issued in the form of a share. You are to use the judgments and facts and circumstances that existed upon the issuance of the instrument. Public business entities would apply the proposed standard for annual periods beginning after December 15, 2015, and interim periods within that year. Other entities would have the same effective date, but would have relief from applying the standard during the quarter.
Okay, thanks, Billy, and thank you for joining our podcast today. For additional podcasts and other thought leadership publications on current EITF issues, as well as the latest information on other financial reporting topics, please visit the Financial Reporting Network by using the web address on this slide.